Hello, everybody. It is your host, Dr. Goons, here on the Jobbers and Goons channel. And today we have a very special guest, of critically acclaimed writer. He has written some of my favorite material ever, included Midnighter, and he is the current architect behind Scarlet Witch. My buddy, Steve Orlando, if you want to say what's up.
Hey, what's up? It's good to see everyone, or at least auditorily see everyone. That's not what ears do, but just assume that what I said made sense. Sorry.
Yeah, fair enough. And today we are going to be talking about. It only has to make sense for you. That's how this works. And we're really going to be talking about some of his modern work. You guys know me. I will be sneaking in a couple topics about Midnighter. But regardless, the first thing I want to talk about, because my channel really took off when I started covering more Doctor Doom materials. One of the funniest characters to ever exist. I've read all his appearances. And when I saw him in the Darkhold crossover, I was very excited. I was like, we're going to get some Doom action, especially mixing in with Elder Gods. You can't ask for much more. And I want to know, with such a grandiose character, with such flavor in Doctor Doom, what was it like approaching the story working with his character?
It's intimidating. Doom is, protected by Marvel very, pretty strongly compared to other characters. That's not unusual. In franchises, like, not everybody gets to work on Doom, or at least without, like, really showing your work and presenting your case. Not everybody gets to work on Yoda, there are certain characters people do, publishers do, studios do a lot of work to protect their mystique and maintain their mystique. So you can't just, like, do a one-off out of nowhere Doom story where he gets his ass handed to him by Squirrel Girl more than once, of course. And so it's intimidating, like, you have to create a story that essentially rises to the level of the character. And that's why, even though Doom does get his comeuppance in Darkhold, we were sure to give him moments as well. And of course, things that only he can do, right? Like, this is the guy that faced down the Beyonders in Secret Wars. So once we realized that the original Darkhold was going to drive any human mad that read it, we also immediately knew that there was only one person on the planet that could read it with no problem, and it would obviously be Doom. So, I mean, his will is, he might be a scotch less intelligent in the grand scheme than Reed Richards, and pain to admit that, but I would argue that his will is probably even stronger, and maybe the strongest in the Marvel Universe. So, again, it's intimidating, but you gotta, if he's an antagonist, yes, he may not win the day, but he's got to, in wrestling terms, he's got to look strong in defeat, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that, because, we use my channel's Jobbers and Goons. I cover jobber-like characters all the time. If we're talking Marvel, it's definitely Silver Surfer or Nightcrawler. Not naming other names, but those are my two prime examples. And
Silver Surfer, jobber, that dude's got the power cosmic. Well, that's a different discussion. I'll come back on.
There's plenty of power cosmic victims. There's a lot of Surfer, like, literally when he first appeared to Ben Grimm, got knocked out, and, like, you just see in the panel his ass sticking in the air as, like, he's just out cold. Surfer's been choked out by regular humans. Like, he gets into a lot of situations where he's just putting people over for no reason. Like, damn, Surfer, you have all this, you're supposed to fight back on paper. So he's definitely a funny character to refer to as a jobber. Now, Doom, on the other hand, isn't ever really used in that manner, and I think that's important in storytelling, because in terms of referencing Darkhold, when he was taking down, I felt like that was a perfect demonstration of the threat we're dealing with. Like, even the characters who want to see him lose were like, all right, Doom just doesn't get his ass kicked like this. Clearly what we're dealing with is some next level stuff. And was that kind of your approach with Doom? Like, hey, if anyone's going to show you how strong something is, let's put Doom in this kind of situation.
Oh yeah, and to be clear, he's still, like it's like keep Roman strong, man. Like yes, of course, like we established the scale of Chthon because he does, like Doom can't survive in his realm, but he also makes it back, which almost no one else could do, right? So even in defeat, he still is one of the toughest guys out there, and yeah, I mean, listen, the storytelling mechanics of pro wrestling are actually very similar to the storytelling mechanics of comics. So, Chthon has been around for a long time, but not around recently. Having him terror and his realm terrorize Doom, that's the Goldberg return where he squashed Brock Lesnar in 2016, right? We don't want to talk about what happened after, of course, but like that's the moment. That's the shock moment. And the thing is that like that only matters when, just like in wrestling, your villains and your antagonists are protected. Like the first time Mongol came back after for the Man Who Has Everything, it was like shocking. Same with the Anti-Monitor. Same with like his return in Sinestro Corps War. And since then, the more someone gets beaten without getting some wins, they get devalued. Just like in wrestling, or just like in sports, when someone goes in, or I should say, shoot sports, when someone goes on a losing streak. So yeah, the philosophy is exactly the same, right? You got to make an opening statement. You got to set the stakes, and at the same time, like you can't just completely job a guy like Doom out. He still survived something almost no one else in the Marvel universe could. So even in defeat, right? So it's very much a similar philosophy, but I think that's why when it works, I mean that's why those moments in wrestling do work, right? Like nobody, despite what some people at that one company say about wins and losses not mattering, they do matter.
Yes,
They
yeah,
do
I
matter.
agree.
They may not matter as much as some people think, but they matter. Rest in peace, because I think he was a creative genius. But how many wild speeches can Bray give, or could Bray give, to resuscitate his character when he never fucking won? Right? And he's was one of the most creative people in the business of all time, in my opinion. But he would have reached even more heights if he actually fucking won sometimes. Instead of doing the heavy lifting to revive himself just with a killer promo or a new angle or things like that. So. I think the logic is true, honestly, in nearly every storytelling sense across many mediums.
Yeah, and on the magic side for Marvel, I think that's important too, because it kind of establishes the hierarchy or what to expect, like heading into it. For example, Baron Mordo in Marvel is an absolute jobber. I've seen him prep for literally eternity, run up on Doctor Strange in his house, and immediately get sent into oblivion. There was not even a fight. I don't remember Strange even looking at him. It was very embarrassing. But we also know that when someone a caliber of Mordo is defeated by someone, if it's not the usual people beating him up, it does matter. And to me, the way you were using characters to kind of demonstrate the Chthon, because for those that don't know, and Steve kind of brought this up, Chthon isn't as mainstream of a Hell Lord or Eldritch being in Marvel. In fact, like you said, we don't see him that much. So I'm kind of curious, what was your approach with Chthon? Like, being able to flesh out more of his story, who he is, like the fact that how he created the Darkhold out of another Elder God, it kind of got him banished. The Marvel cosmology can sometimes be confusing, especially with the different Hell Lords and the landscape of that. So I'm kind of, what's your take on Chthon, especially when you're heading into the run?
I mean, we wanted to, he is a powerful character. At the same time, as you said, things are very complicated. Everything in comics is complicated, especially, I mean, like Wanda's family, her quote unquote, her extended family is one of the most buck wild ones in comics. It's strange in a world of strange families. So, with Chthon, it was kind of like, look, he's always kind of been he's been, he tainted her soul or whatever from the time she was born. She was always supposed to be this vessel for him to take over eventually and all this. And he's always kind of been a stand-in in many ways, like a metaphorical stand-in for Wanda's struggles with mental health. And so we knew with Darkhold and Trial of Magneto that we wanted to sort of not close the book, write the final page of this of a lot of Wanda's long-standing chapters. Her issues with the mutants, her issues with the Darkhold and Chthon. So when he came back, the focus, we didn't want to get too mired down in the lore. Not that we contradicted anything, but the key is that the important things are how he relates to Wanda. What he's done to Wanda, how he's plagued her life, how he sees her in a different way than she sees herself. Of course, he's wrong in how he sees her. She's just a thing to him. And how that's eventually his downfall. But the idea was, yes, to bring him in and have him make this big push, and of course to show how his world and power can corrupt others, as you see with the Darkhold Defiled. But then to knowing that he's been sort of that stand-in for Wanda's own internal struggles. Anyone who has been to therapy, anyone who's struggled with mental health knows that there's very rarely like a quote-unquote cure. There's management. There's finding ways to integrate these struggles into your life, and if you can, turn them into a positive. So with Chthon, that's why you see that she realizes that her issue has been that she's tried to destroy him time and time again, but she can't. He's a fundamental, being. He's part of reality. He's the elder god of chaos, and chaos is one of the oldest, powers in creation. So she has to do something else, and that's how we got around to the moment where she transmutes the Darkhold and chains him inside her soul. And now, she has this living avatar for the chaos in her life that she's always got to kind of manage and try to keep control of. Now, how has she been doing with that? Stay tuned. In the upcoming Scarlet Witch stuff, we've already seen a couple hints. But yes, like our approach was focus on the relationships, the character dynamics between them, and give folks as much of the lore as they need. But not so much that you're kind of wrapped up wondering, how old he is and who his brother is and how he relates to Set or Gaia and things like that. That's a great story, but it wasn't this story. This is the story of Wanda overcoming.
Yeah, and for sure I could see those questions did kind of pop up for me. But again, we're dealing with right away. We don't know if the Defiled are going to recover. We don't know how that's going to play out. We're dealing with... And she has to deal with this too. One major rule, and you honored it beautifully, is you don't typically get a second chance against Dr. Doom. Like, if you beat him, cool, but you better kill him. And he pretty much said that. He was like, yeah, no, Chthon's an idiot for not killing me. Because now when he comes back, I will be ready, and it's going to be over for him. And I think that was like a beautiful catalyst.
And he was willing to work with Wanda. The thing I like about Doom is that he's an antagonist, but I don't even know if I would call him... No, he has probably evil tendencies, but he's not what I think is fascinating about him is there's plenty of times where Doom sees the bigger picture, right? Like he wants to rule the world, or I should say he thinks that he's the best suited to, but he doesn't want to destroy it. So you have moments like, yes, Doom would work with Wanda to take out Chthon. Doom would work with the heroes, going back to things like Onslaught, even if Tony did have to rope him into that, that complexity. I mean, he's one of the first characters to have that, and now I think a lot of people when they revamp villains are chasing that level of complexity. Where yes, he's an antagonist, but it's not as though he wants to destroy the planet or even eradicate its people. It's more complex than that. So he will stand with people who might be enemies the next day for him because he is capable of seeing the bigger picture, and that's not true of every antagonist Marvel has. But I do think it's true of him, and I think, yeah, you see, he was happy to work with Wanda, but of course his ego also means that he could never imagine Wanda would screw him after she's done using him, right? She couldn't imagine that someone would deign to use him like he uses everyone else. So, and that's always been his fault, look at Secret Wars. All he has to, it all comes down, reality itself comes down to him admitting that Mr. Fantastic would have done a better job with the same power than him. That's kind of all there is for him. And I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, it's always been a big part of his character, and I think what makes him amazing in that regard too is he has been in a lot of ways made to be proven right about his value to the world. For example, best case I can think of with this is when Panther God himself viewed the world and who would be best to rule everything, including the assets of Wakanda. And he saw, yes, technically, humanity's greatest king or greatest hope to survive in a great world would be Doctor Doom. And he's looked at as this terrible being, but when you go to his country, there's often times where they're like, hey, there's no crime here. Everyone's fed. Everyone's happy. It's almost as if his ego needs something to rule. Like, being king is cool, but you have to rule something. And that principle is not alien to Doctor Doom's character. And it sets him up because immediately he had no worries about Chthon in terms of before the first fight, of course. Like, he was like, no, I can go take. He even considers an elder god his rival, which should be crazy. Like, any other human saying that shit, you're like, all right, you're just full of it. But I was like, okay, maybe Doctor Doom would have an elder god as a rival. This is the same guy that slapped Mephisto in his own realm. So
yeah, I mean, he slapped Mephisto. He stole the power cosmic. He's recreated reality by staring down the Beyonders. Like, Doom is a lot of things, but afraid almost never happens.
Yeah, and I thought that was one of the coolest lines too. When you it was funny as hell that he refused to tell them what actually happened. That was a very Doom move of him. But he said, you know, the forces of Chthon met the unbridled resolve of Latveria. And that is something I immediately associate with Doom. You know, that's what makes him such a badass. Like when he said he was going to hold the line against the Mad Celestial. You know, how much time do you need? That's just who he is. He's not going to back down, win or lose. The only way you can really get the drop on him is to just be overwhelmingly powerful to the point he didn't expect it, which is kind of what happened there, and to play on his ego.
I mean, I think that's the Mad Celestial thing is that's a great. I mean, that's what's special about him. He'll do that, you know, and then once the world is safe, he'll turn around and stab Reed in the heart, you know. Like once he can get back to his own personal projects of settling a college vendetta with the entire world on the line. But until then, yeah, I mean, he's that guy. I think that if there's ever someone that is going to walk out from behind a wall and get one up on the supposed villain of a story, it's going to be Doom, right? So I would, you know, I think that's what's always been special about him. Look, he's the guy that inspired one of the guys that inspired Darth Vader.
Yeah, side note, I mean, you could end the conversation right there. You inspired one of the GOATs.